Hey Dina, what if I told you that you could potentially increase your cognitive functioning and athletic performance by taking either a piece of gum, a pouch, a lozenge, a patch, or maybe even, this is going to give it away, vape.
Oh, Bob, because yeah, when you first mentioned this, I was like, oh, well, caffeine. We've already talked about caffeine. Where
Yes,
are you
yes.
headed? But
And
then
that,
when you said patch and vape, yeah. Mm,
that would
uh,
be interesting to see a caffeine patch, by the way, now that you just mentioned that. But no,
yeah.
today is all about nicotine, listeners, nicotine and athletic performance. And no, we're not talking about cigarettes, right? Because a lot has progressed since, Dina and I have grown up. And Dina, I don't know, you'll probably have to remind all the listeners, and I'll just throw this out. I grew up in a household that had a copious amount of secondhand smoke blown into my face at all times. How about you?
Yes, I did with one parent and some grandparents I lived with.
Yeah.
There was a lot of secondhand smoke in
Oh, it's
many,
crazy,
yeah,
wasn't it? And
vehicles
yeah,
and
right? Closed windows, like everything, right?
homes. Thanks for the flashback to undesirable childhood memories.
Undesirable flash. So, and I don't know. This is not a history lesson by any means, listeners, but I don't know what year it started taking effect. But we had that switch into a lot of nicotine providing avenues that were not cigarette based, which and I feel like these days, and just as a little bit of background, listeners, if you don't know this, both Dina and I are in the Colorado area. Dina, I visited Boulder, where you're just up from. I visited a couple weekends ago, and I swear every time I walk around Boulder, there's always a smell in the air, and let's just say it is not nicotine related.
Oh
And that
yeah,
might be a topic for another podcast.
absolutely. I have a friend, Bob, who visits from the East Coast, and when he comes, he says, "It smells like hippie around here."
That's so
Sometimes that's
true.
body odor, sometimes
Yeah,
that's
I
the
know,
other
right?
things in the
It's
air floating
actually, that's
around.
a good way to describe that. It's a hippie smell. Okay, that's good. Okay, we're gonna come back to the topic at hand. So we're talking about nicotine. So why are we talking about nicotine? Let me set this up because obviously it's been around for a while. People have been talking about nicotine and athletic performance for a while as I've been researching this, but it hasn't come honestly onto my radar until a couple weeks ago when I had one of my college athletes actually ask me about it because we were talking about stimulants and talking about caffeine specifically, and this athlete asked me about nicotine and the potential benefits. Because here, let me just set this up, because he was asking how could he have more like awakeness, or go time, I call it, right? Like be
Yeah.
more awake, be more present in the afternoons when we usually crash, right? So obviously I talked to him about nutrition first because there might be some underlying issues. But it was interesting because I asked him, I said, well, do you use caffeine? Have you used caffeine before? He's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, how does that work for you? He's like, well, it just doesn't do it as much for me. So,
Hmm.
and I don't know if he just wasn't consuming enough caffeine, like physiologically. I don't know if he's habituated to caffeine, but that's when nicotine came up, and it kind of caught me off guard. I'm not gonna lie, right? I've
Yeah.
seen the pouches are huge these days, right? They come in the little chew containers, but they're pouches, and you don't spit. You just put them up on your gum, and I don't know what you do. I've never tried them, so I don't know if you
Yeah.
suck on them or not, but you just let them sit there, and I don't know. Anyway, have you ever tried them, D?
No, I haven't. Well, as you're talking, Bob, I'm just keeping in mind like open-minded
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
we're going to talk hint on some science here, what we
Yeah,
know and things like this in this context. But
yeah.
okay, I'm not like anti yet, but there are pros and cons with everything, so we'll
There
dive
are,
into
right?
that.
There's even pros and cons of caffeine, right? I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, every time I
Yeah.
bring up caffeine, and it's like people are on the edge of their seat, like, oh my gosh, is he gonna promote it, or is he gonna,
Hmm.
destroy it? And yeah, we just want to provide some information on what we've seen with nicotine, which is not a lot in real life, but we kind of did a little bit of research on this, and we just want to share this. So let's just start with the basics. So nicotine is a stimulant. It's an alkaloid stimulant. It is obviously found in tobacco plants. It's actually found in some foods too, in very, very low amounts.
Yeah.
But it acts on the central nervous system, so the brain and the spinal cord, right? And it acts specifically on these nicotinic acetylcholine receptors in the brain. Now, that right away, brain, acetylcholine, right? That should start pointing to maybe the topics that we're going to talk about, and that would probably be cognitive related, right? Now, what I will say is I have looked at the research, and there's not a ton on this, by the way, Dee. I don't know what you found in your research, but this is not like caffeine, right? Caffeine is so well studied, and it seems like they're really picking apart caffeine and for different populations and ages and amounts and everything. I feel like nicotine is still really in its infancy, especially with athletic performance. And a lot of the things which we'll summarize at the end will kind of lead us to the, well, what should you do, listeners? I mean, obviously it's your choice, but let's go into the potential benefits, Dee.
Well, you kind of hinted at one, thinking of brain here and like what is the level of attention or focus or alertness. And it's that different, sometimes hard to put into words. Some of us know when we're brain foggy or cloudy
Yes.
in the brain, but on the opposite end of that spectrum is that feeling of like hyper focus. You're clued into whatever it is you're doing at such a high level. And so I think that's one of those things that comes out. And then when you put that in the sporting context, right? The activity that we're doing or the specific technique or skill that we're implementing at the time. I mean, I was thinking, I think one of the papers you had found, Bob, was in archery, right? And just that preciseness or
Oh,
precision you need, right? So
Yeah.
some of those things I think come to the top of the potential benefit list.
Absolutely.
What else have you seen, Bob?
Well, and yeah, so with the brain, the alertness, the focus, also increasing sympathetic activation, so that branch of the autonomic nervous system. So when we do increase that, which is the fight or flight, for those of you who don't know what the sympathetic is, that is your fight or flight, right? So that's going to increase heart rate, it's going to increase blood pressure, kind of gives you that little bit of like adrenaline shot, right? So
Yeah.
again, we're setting this up for at the end, we're going to maybe give you the, if you do this particular sport or activity, maybe it's a pro, maybe it's a con. Because as I'm looking at these, potential benefits, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's not a benefit for some sports, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about increasing heart rate and blood pressure, and I'm out doing whatever, running a marathon or something, I don't know. I honestly,
Yeah.
I just don't know if I would want that, because that's going to really potentially inhibit my performance at times,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a second potential benefit. And we say potential because, again, everyone is going to be N of one. You're going to react differently, just like everyone reacts differently to caffeine, right? What's
Yeah.
another one, D?
Oh, well, I was just also thinking of that ability to respond to whatever the situation is, like your reaction time,
Yep.
which, I think of us aging athletes too. Like, I am not trying to slow down, but I'm slowing down, like hand-eye coordination, some of those things. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't particularly right now anyways. We'll see if pickleball happens in my future, but like I am not
Oh,
involved in any sports that need that quick reaction time.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could argue on that, like falling on the route,
I
the
was going
tree
to
route on
say,
the trail, you actually
yeah,
do have.
trails, you definitely need reaction time, because how many times do you hit a toe on a rock or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. But for our team sport athletes or those doing, high speed sports in race cars and the like you have to, your life depends on this,
Oh, yeah, for
right? And
sure. For
so
sure.
nicotine then that correlation or maybe there's some causation there, like improving your reaction time.
Absolutely. There's another one kind of related to the brain. Is that just a mood boost, right? So kind of improving mood,
Yeah.
because nicotine actually increases the dopaminergic effects, right? So it's kind of that
Hmm.
dopamine hit. So all of a sudden you're like, hey, I feel good. I'm really
Uh-huh.
motivated to do this, right? We're going to give you some potential cons later, but that could be a pro for this, is improving mood, which we know can be associated with better exercise or better exercise performance.
Yeah, I was thinking of the pain
Oh, yeah.
perception. Gosh, that's a whole fascinating area of science, isn't it? Whole other pod, probably.
Yeah.
But I think here's where nicotine also has a role, not unlike caffeine and some of the other things that we've talked about in the past, is just altering our sense of pain and that whole cascade of, what happens after we detect that. So some mitigation of what we're, feeling from a pain or uncomfortable kind of sensation or set of sensations.
Yeah, and I do think that's very person specific and even gender specific because we know females have such a higher pain tolerance than males. Of course, I'm generalizing, but I think I'm about 99.9% correct on that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is validity to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the consensus, yeah.
Yeah. And probably the last one that I think we found is maybe, and I really want to emphasize maybe here, maybe increasing fat oxidation. And don't jump out of your chairs just yet, listeners, because these are very slight increases that some research has found, and the effects are so modest and so temporary that it may not even be on our topic list. But I did want to mention that because we talk about fat oxidation a lot and metabolic efficiency a lot. So I wanted to mention it. But listen, I wouldn't recommend any athlete take nicotine to increase fat oxidation. That wouldn't be one of my priorities for actually using nicotine if you're going to use it.
I would agree with that, Bob.
Yeah. But okay, so those are the potential benefits, right? Now, there are some potential risks when it comes to physiology, right? So, number one is, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, but vasoconstriction. So, nicotine actually constricts the arteries and the blood vessels, which could potentially reduce oxygen delivery and nutrient delivery to the working muscles during exercise. So, it's kind of interesting because we're starting to paint a picture of maybe which athletes would be better taking or which sports would be better taking nicotine and maybe not taking nicotine.
Yeah, because don't we want improved oxygen delivery?
We really do.
For
We want
our
vasodilation.
Yeah, so
Yes,
you're
yes.
right. There's going to be some context here, like who and what setting and sport and type of person might this be a pro or a con, or who knows, individual response. And blood pressure is an issue too, then,
Oh,
as a
yeah.
consequence, or maybe some other mechanisms at play. But increasing our blood pressure or altering our heart rate, that
Yeah.
could be an issue, right, Bob? Like you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
not always a desirable one.
Well, and I think even just endurance, anything, right? If I'm going to go run a 5K, 10K marathon, bike 100 miles, like whatever it is, like most people pay attention to their heart rate while they're doing this. And then if you take nicotine, it actually disrupts your heart rate, like it changes that. It's knocked you out of zones, and you don't, like, if you don't train with nicotine a lot, you don't know what your quote unquote nicotine zones are. So then you're probably freaking out because you're looking at your heart rate monitor like, oh my gosh, I'm 8 beats higher. What's going on? I'm in zone 3 instead of zone 2, and now you slow down, or maybe you speed up, or right. So there's all these different things. And yeah, having a higher blood pressure when you are already taxing your cardiovascular system is probably not a good thing, especially in environments such as heat and humidity, right? Because there's even more physiological strain on your body. So, there's going to be some time and place discussions with this, right?
Agreed. I wonder if this also ties to some of the evidence showing impacts on recovery.
Oh, for sure.
And just like all those things that we just talked about, how negatively is that affecting recovery? Or what are the other contributors that may affect time to recover or the quality of the recovery, handling whatever the stress load is?
Yeah, and when we think recovery, as sport dietitians, we think a lot of different things, listeners. So let's just qualify that. This is not recovery like filling up glycogen stores. I'm not familiar with any research that has actually looked at nicotine and glycogen repletion, where we do have research with caffeine and glycogen depletion. I don't think it exists with nicotine. So what we're talking about with recovery is really sleep, right? Because sleep is where our body recovers, where growth hormone is secreted, right, at the highest amount. So when we potentially impact sleep quality and maybe even quantity, That's the recovery that we're talking about. And nicotine actually may reduce that. And of course, it is going to be N of one. I don't believe there are any randomized controlled studies on that particular topic, but there could be in the future, because, and I kind of feel like there will be, because this is, it's not new, like I said earlier, but there's more attention being put into it. But I'm with you on the recovery. You know what really gets me in terms of the potential risks physiologically, and it's the addiction, right? It's the dependence on this, right? And you can argue, well, what about caffeine? Well, caffeine is actually much easier to come off of than nicotine. And this has actually been proven, and the research actually states that nicotine is much more addictive and highly addictive, especially if someone's using it in higher doses, right? And even, I was poking around on some nicotine, pouch websites, and I found this warning label at literally, Dina, the top of their website before you even kind of got into it. And it said, warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind. Where have you ever seen, even with a caffeine capsule or pill, where have you ever seen that warning? I've never seen that with anything with caffeine, right?
Yeah.
So it's something to be said. I'm really scared, especially with my college age athletes. I'm really, really concerned about the addiction and the dependence, right? I really am, because that could be a situation where they do overuse it, because that's like the perfect storm in college, right? A lot of practice, a lot of school, very little sleep, and all of a sudden, what do you do to try to stay awake and perform your best, right?
True,
That's what worries me.
And I'm just thinking of the gene testing that we do, and also just seeing this individual aspect of, like, some of us have gene variants that make us more prone to addictive behaviors, and looking at the dopamine, serotonin pathways and gene variants and the like. So it definitely is something to strongly consider in this decision process.
For sure. So let's just kind of review. We've been kind of saying it kind of a little bit throughout this whole thing, but the cognitive and neuromuscular effects of nicotine. So, and we mentioned most of these. It may improve reaction time, may improve short-term focus, and short-term being the key phrase there, could slightly improve hand-eye coordination, maybe improve or impair motor control, right? And then it may reduce anxiety if you have a low dose of nicotine, but it may increase anxiety if you have a high dose. Now that's going to be a total N of one, obviously, and based on genes and everything, right? So I feel like that's not really one to talk about, but I will say, based on that, Dee, and we're going to come back to this, because we're gonna kind of summarize with maybe what sports and what type of athletes may benefit from it. But I just want to throw some things out there, because in the research I did, I found that up to 30 to 50% of professional athletes actually use nicotine. I had no idea. Like, I knew in baseball. Baseball is like, that's being used. That's always been used. Like chewing tobacco, they spit, right? All that stuff. Then they replace it with sunflower seeds. But there's a lot of sports like football, hockey, skiing, even, because of these because the delivery mechanism is not gross anymore, right?
Oh, yeah, it's changed so much.
Yeah.
Also, I wonder, just along those lines, Bob, is it less of a stigma or more with the different forms? Like, we're not smoking
Good
cigarettes
points.
now.
Good
We can
points. Yeah.
do these little pouches or whatever and not blow smoke. So is it
Yep.
less like seen as like, whoa, you're so, gonna, whatever
Yeah.
the negative thoughts are?
Well, remember back in the day, Dina, when we were growing up, smoking was kind of a cool thing, right? Like, if you saw someone, this was when we were really young kids. I don't know if you remember this, but this is the portrayal that I had in all the commercials that were on TV and all that stuff. Where, like, hey, if someone's got a cig in their fingers, they look very very sexy, very distinguished,
Oh
right?
la la.
Yeah, right. And then it started being like, oh, cancer, lung cancer, boom, boom, all these red flags with it. And now, yeah, to your point, now we've got vaping, which is, it kind of has that sexy approach back to it again. But to your point, like with the pouches specifically, because that's what I'm seeing more of, they're so discreet, right? So discreet. Like, you can rarely tell, because they make them so small, and they actually make them in different doses, which we'll chat about later. But they're so small, you really can't tell when someone has it in their lip,
That's
as
true.
opposed to if someone puts a dip like of chewing tobacco in. I mean, their whole
Yeah, that
mouth is like there's like a deformity in their mouth kind of a thing because there's so
yeah,
much, right? So yeah,
true,
it
true.
could be more of a socially acceptable thing these days. Now, of course, all of that said, right, with everything we're talking about, I feel like we need to separate the different energy system because as I was going through the research, that was one glaring thing that was pretty apparent with me is that from an aerobic standpoint, anaerobic versus aerobic. From an aerobic standpoint, I did not see nicotine having many benefits from any of the research I looked at. Now, there are maybe a few cases, and one case is maybe if you're doing an ultra endurance event, lack of sleep, you're not sleeping, like maybe. But I
Maybe.
would say, why not just use caffeine, right? Like, it's not depend. Like, I don't know. I just maybe that's
Yeah.
me. Maybe that's because I've never used nicotine. I mean, it's me. But what we're seeing is not a lot of positive contributing factors and associations with using nicotine in endurance sports. But
Hmm.
anaerobic sports, so team sports, and you mentioned archery, and I mentioned football and hockey and skiing, like those kind of things. That's where I actually have seen a little, and when I say little, I mean little, more based or a little more support for actually using nicotine is those skill-based sports, right? Reaction time. We're looking at motor performance, not just running on a trail or
Yeah.
riding on your bike, kind of a thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
This just make me think of a question, Bob, that I hadn't looked thoroughly into. Maybe you have this too. That a question listeners might be thinking of compared to caffeine. Of course, we have genetics and like how slow or fast of a metabolizer. We have dose, but like
Mm-hmm.
how long if I do a little vape thingy or a little
Mm-hmm.
pouch thingy, and let's say the doses are on the low side, how long will that work for me? In terms like I'm in my ultra,
Mm-hmm.
will I get the benefit? I feel like there's too many variables to know for sure, like
Way
how
too
long
many
this is
variables.
going to last for
And
me.
yeah, and of course this is dose dependent, but from
Yes.
what I have read, the half-life of caffeine is much longer than the half-life of nicotine. Now, it is totally dose dependent, and in fact, it's also mode dependent if you are smoking, vaping, chewing, pouching. What do you call it? Pouching? I don't know
Yeah.
what you call it, right? So it
Yeah.
is dependent on that. But overall, what I've read is nicotine does have a shorter half-life, which could potentially suggest you need to dose with it more frequently, which goes back to my number one concern of developing dependency and addiction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hate to come back to that, but it's something, working with young athletes, being a parent, right? I'm just like, oh, I have a problem with that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like more sport wise or energy system wise, leaning towards that anaerobic kind of benefit in the
Yeah.
anaerobic type sports.
Right, right. But I don't know. I mean, yes, based on the research, right? But I'm thinking application wise, like because of the potential physiological concerns of it, like increasing heart rate, blood pressure. I don't know if like I'm just thinking football, I'm thinking soccer, I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking hockey. Like I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Even though it would have that really good cognitive benefit, potentially, the physiological detriments, I think in my mind would outweigh that because I don't want someone on a field or a court or a rink like skating around, running around, and all of a sudden their heart rate is high, their blood pressure is high,
Yeah.
they're feeling good mentally, but potentially physically they may not benefit as much as mentally, right? So I think what you
True,
brought up
true.
earlier, archery, I think is a great example, right? Because
I mean,
I mean, you can argue that because you don't want too high of a heart rate because you have to concentrate, right? But
yeah,
it doesn't have a lot of cardiovascular movement and strain on the body, right?
right. Geez, I'm imagining all these flow charts, like how to
I
figure
know.
this all out. It seems
Exactly.
super, super complex.
It is, right?
You,
Well,
yeah, all the nuances.
there are, and I mean, let's come back to our summary here in a second because I do
Yeah.
want to bring something up. I did look on one of these nicotine pouch websites because I was interested, like, what are they putting in the pouches, right? I mean, it's not just
Mhm.
tobacco, it's not just nicotine, right? So let me just read. This is from a popular brand of the pouches, and let me just read what is actually in a pouch, okay? And
Okay.
again, this is just one company, but I'm sure they're fairly similar. So you have nicotine salt And this is what they say is pharmaceutical grade nicotine. So it sounds like it's lab based or lab made, right? Wouldn't be
Yep.
just like tobacco.
Right.
Stabilizers. So the stabilizer here is hydroxypropyl cellulose, and this is a plant-based food additive used to maintain pouch consistency. You have fillers, which are microcrystalline cellulose maltitol, which is a sugar alcohol, by the way, and gum arabic, which, by the way, if you have too many sugar alcohols, that could increase your risk for GI distress.
Yeah.
And I've been hearing, and through my research, I've read that because if you do develop a dependency of nicotine, you obviously consume a lot. So I'm thinking, Dee, there might be an increase in GI distress that we see with some athletes as time goes on. I don't know, but let me get back to the ingredients, the fillers. These are ingredients used to add bulk to each pouch, right? Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
pH adjusters, sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. These are minerals to help adjust pH levels.
All
I don't
right.
know. I've never heard that before, Dee. I'm not a food scientist, but okay. I don't know why. And that's just
Yep.
me. But do you know why?
Nope.
Okay. And last but not least, of course, it has to taste good, doesn't it? Otherwise, why do you stick it in your cheek and suck on it? Well, sweeteners in this particular product is asulfime potassium. Not a big fan of that. That is an artificial sugar substitute used to produce a sweet taste. Well, there are a few artificial sweeteners that I do not like, and that is one of them. So when I look at all of those ingredients, I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of chemical stuff, a lot of preservatives, a lot of additives. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I know how that makes me feel. And that is going to also contribute to my summary when we end this up, or when we finish this.
Definitely more considerations for the consumer.
Yes, right. And it's not like, like gels with caffeine. Let's come back to caffeine. Like how many of those are you going to take? Maybe, I mean, it depends on your event or race or whatever, but I get it, right? But you're not taking that many. And then when you're done with the gel, you're done. But if you
Yeah,
take caffeine pills, you take a couple and you're done. It's not like you continue to take them.
well, I was just going to ask because the dosing on this particular product, you were reading the ingredients, it comes in two doses. Like, would you say that's a low and a moderate
It is,
dose
yeah. So I have, when
or
I
a
was doing
low
the
high
research, I
dose
found the range to be between 1 and 8 milligrams of nicotine per serving.
per
And these
serving?
per serving, right? So, and again, it totally depends on how you're getting it too, because we're just talking about pouches, but it depends on vapes and cigarettes and patches and all this stuff. But yeah, these particular pouches are 3 and 6 milligram pouches. So it's kind of mid to mid high, right?
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
also scares me because I don't want one of my athletes going into like a 6 milligram pouch without ever having taken this before. I just like, I'm very much let's start very low if you're going to do it and see how your
Yeah.
body responds first.
Right.
What else? Anything else that I've missed from you that you want to contribute to this whole nicotine and athletic performance?
Honestly, some of this is just my like end user consumer brain. Like, what does this look like? How much is a
Mm.
pouch?
Mm,
And it looks like just visibly, this is relatively small pouch, but like how
right.
long does that thing stay in your mouth? It looks like
Yeah.
upwards of an hour or so,
Yep.
depending on. So those are other things, just thinking of like timing of this kind of thing
It's a
in
good point. I
relation to
mean,
what you're doing. Yeah, so
yeah.
just
And do you have to like if you're playing a sport, or do you have to spit like can you spit it out in the field, or like
right.
you have to think of
Yeah,
those things, right? Because you're not
right.
obviously consuming this, you're not swallowing it,
Yeah,
right? So
right,
you
right.
have to think about just like a gel packet or whatever. You're like, oh, I need to
Exactly.
find a trash can. I need to,
Exactly.
be wise and respect the planet and find a trash can for this.
Right. Well, that's interesting to kind of go over to just like, what does this look like? What is in a product, like a
Hmm.
pouch delivery for nicotine,
Yep.
as opposed to the classic cigarette to get the nicotine?
We're gonna get to our summary now, Dee. I'll go first if you
Yeah.
want me to, or do you want
Okay.
to go
Yeah.
first? Like what? So based on all of this, listeners, we're just gonna give you our unbiased opinion, right? This is only what it is. It's just an opinion based on the research we've done.
Yeah.
Neither of us have had a direct athlete that we have worked with who have used this, so we have no real life examples yet. Maybe we'll do another one of these, and I'll have some real life examples. But you know,
Mhm.
I respect the fact that science always helps us understand our bodies. Sometimes, though, science is very biased, right? It's slow because it's very, very difficult to do these studies sometimes, and that's why a lot of researchers argue. So I want to start, with the whole positive, negative, positive sandwich. I do appreciate the research being done on nicotine. However, I do not think we're in any place right now to use nicotine as a performance enhancing aid. In fact, there's been a lot of the research that have had either no effect or ergolytic effects, which is performance decreasing. So from what I've read, it's just not there right now, right? And it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just I'm not comfortable with where we are with the research and with what sports it may affect positively and what sports it may not affect positively. I'm just not really there yet. I'm not buying into it. And again, I just come back to the whole conservative in me is like, I do not want an addiction to be created and I don't want dependency to be created. Those are my two big sticking points.
Yeah, Bob. I mean, I think I would be in a similar state of mind here, just thinking of pros and cons. And like, even if you have the time to figure out the right dose, the right delivery system, the timing, your potential, or like, what are the negative side effects you feel? It's going to take a long time to figure that out. Not to say that's not worth your time, but double duty on all of the other things that we know through science and through the years of research that we have that will help performance. I feel like the negatives are definitely outweighing the potential positives here. And that huge piece that you have mentioned a few times, like the addiction risk, it's significant. And so what does that mean for the long term also?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that this would be a ergogenic aid since it hasn't really been proven out well in through research that I would personally or professionally recommend as one of my first, right?
So here's a question, Dee. You know how we kind of experiment on ourselves sometimes?
Yeah.
The ending question, listeners, is what you're wondering is like, oh, are Bob and Dina gonna try this? So let me ask you the question.
Yeah.
Would you try this as a guinea pig N of one?
I might try it. I'll wait for maybe a pickleball part of my
Okay.
phase of life or something. You
Okay.
know, I'm kind of being silly here, but
Yeah,
some
yeah.
other kind of sport where I feel like I know I'm already at working hard to try and even be a competitor or be
Yeah.
effective in this sport. Maybe I would tap into everything I can.
Okay.
I
Okay.
might consider testing this at the low dose, but I don't
Yeah.
know that this would be like high priority for me.
So when you're on the path to become world champion pickleballer, then we're gonna talk about nicotine and athletic performance for Dina.
I might, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as we're talking about it, it's like, what?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. With some other things like genetically based, this might
Right.
be an
Right.
issue for me. And knowing, yeah,
Yeah.
some addiction things in my family history might not be the
Yeah.
smartest option.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what about you,
Exactly.
Bob? Are you with
Well,
your
I don't even have
obstacle
to
course racing? Are you going to bring this in?
I will not even think twice. I will never, and quote me, listeners,
Okay.
never in my life do this ever.
Okay.
This absolutely had, even if the research was like, oh, hey, great, it worked. No, the risk of
Yeah.
dependency, addiction, but also I have to go back to how I was raised too. We opened up, there was so much cigarette and smoke and everything. It's just like it totally turned me off.
Yeah.
Not that we're talking about that, but it's just like there's just something in my DNA that is saying, no way, Jose, never
Yeah.
happened. I will use Dina as my experimenter and not Bob on this one. Even though I will try practically anything, this will not be one of them. I can 100% tell
Well,
you right now.
I mean, although I was joking, honestly, I have no interest in pickleball or any of those kinds of things right now. So this is
Okay.
gonna probably never happen for me
This is
either.
this is
But
like 40 years in the future.
my list of things to try are like that is way
Yeah,
down on
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
list.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's on the list, but there's so many other things to
Right, right.
experiment with.
I'm still trying to get caffeine down with me, right? I'm still trying to figure that
Oh,
out. And it's been
yeah,
like, I don't
exactly.
know, 10 years that I've used it. I don't know. I'm still working on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So,
listeners, Hopefully this was entertaining, but yet educational at the same time. What we would love to do, because this is kind of new in our practices, is we want to hear from you. We want to hear, have you used nicotine? Have you used these pouches for athletic performance? What responses has it had on your body, on your brain? What have you found, right? So here's what I want you to do. Head on over to our Patreon account. So patreon.com/ISN podcast. Sign up for our free membership and just tell us what you think about nicotine. Give us your experience, right? When you're over there, if you want to consider contributing to the podcast, because remember, we are sponsorship free. We accept no money from anybody except out of our own pockets, right? But we would love it if you would join either our silver or our gold program. That's where we provide you a lot of behind the scenes information, both of what Dina and I are doing, but also some special little clips and little videos and some knowledge there. And it's only a couple bucks a month if you want to, but regardless, head on over to our Patreon account and tell us if you've used nicotine, how it's gone, what you think of it, and we would love to hear any feedback. Until next episode, have a fantastic day.